Good evening. My name is Richard Wilson, and I am the president of the League of Women Voters of Washington County, Maryland. This evening's forum welcomes the 5 candidates vying for their party's nomination to run in November for the United States Congress, representing Maryland's 6th congressional district, covering Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington counties, as well as portions of Frederick and Montgomery counties. Both Democratic candidates and 2 of our 3 Republican candidates will share the virtual stage tonight. By the time Election Day, Tuesday, June the 2nd rolls around, many of us will have already put our ballots in the mail, though some will choose to vote in person. So we want to thank Antietam Broadband for agreeing to rebroadcast tonight's forum every evening at 6 o'clock between now and Election Day. As you may know, 2020 marks the 100th birthday of the League of Women Voters. We were founded with the understanding that each person's vote is of tremendous value to our democracy, and having secured passage of the 19th Amendment, voter education was also imperative. Carrie Chapman Catt left the first League of Women Voters Convention in Chicago in 1920 and came home to Maryland to start the League here. Although we are not able to meet in person this evening, we are still taking your questions by email, whether you are connecting on the Washington County Facebook page or not. We have a team from the Frederick alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta sorority working behind the scenes this evening to group similar questions together. Delta Sigma Theta is a nonpartisan organization of predominantly Black, college-educated women, 200,000 strong worldwide, serving their local communities in the areas of service and leadership. And the Frederick chapter has agreed to co-sponsor this evening's forum. Please send us your questions, and the Deltas will help you with the wording. And now let me introduce to you Dr. Michael Powell, our moderator for this evening's forum. Dr. Powell is a professor of history at Frederick Community College. Dr. Powell will go over our agenda and get us started by calling on our candidates for their opening remarks.
This is intended to be a forum and not a debate. So therefore, there will not be questions from one candidate to another. The responses will be to the questions for the most part. You will be allowed, candidates, if you would like to address or spend a portion of your time addressing issues that were raised earlier by other candidates, you may do that, but your time will be constrained, and we would like for you to address the substance of the question posed primarily. You will have 2 minutes initially for introductory comments. Then I will ask questions and we'll rotate among the candidates. And then you will have 2 minutes for a closing as well. We are hoping that we get a good response from those watching when they submit questions, so there should be a variety of questions. The time is posted where you'll be able to see it. I would ask that you all pay attention to the time, please, and stick to the time that you have. If you are talking in mid-sentence, certainly I'm not going to interrupt in mid-sentence. But please be cognizant of the time. Again, questions may be asked by the audience. We encourage the audience to submit questions. Here's your opportunity to directly ask the candidates those issues of which you are concerned, their constituency. Any questions before we launch into the forum? Okay. Well, then let's begin with 2-minute introductions. And I'm going to ask, we're going to start with Mr. Maxwell Barrow, if you would please.
Thank you, Dr. Powell. I really appreciate it. First thing I want to do before I get into any specifics, I want to thank the League of Women Voters of Maryland, Frederick County, Washington County, everywhere throughout the 6th District. I really appreciate this event. All the nonpartisan voter education that you guys do is truly amazing. I also want to thank Delta Sigma Theta, the Frederick County Alumni Chapter, and the Washington, D.C. region for, again, organizing this and putting it all together. This is a really, really great thing. I think that all voter education is very, very important, and I really appreciate it. So a little bit about me before I let the other candidates go. I am a public school teacher here in Montgomery County. I have been my entire career. And the reason I am running is because I believe that this is the time, especially with the coronavirus pandemic, but this is the time to really achieve real progressive change. I really want to fight for universal health care. It's one thing that I see could really help our communities. I look at my students, I look at my friends and my family. That's something that could really improve the lives of all people. I think this is the time to fight for real substantive climate change and fight for the Green New Deal to really refocus our economy to fight for our climate and our planet. And I think it's a good time to fight for universal basic income. I love what's happening in Congress right now. Shout out Congressman Trone for the HEROES Act and the other acts you guys are working on. It's really, really great. And I would love to see us push even more and establish a true universal basic income in this country, just to name a few. Like I said at the beginning, this is a time of real progressive change, and I'm running because I think this is the opportunity we have, and we cannot waste it. So thank you so much, Dr. Powell, and I'll let it go on to the next candidate.
Very good. Thank you. Neil Parrott, if you would please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Delegate Neil Parrott. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight. It's really nice to see most of the candidates here in this forum. I really appreciate everyone participating. And also, Dr. Powell, thank you for hosting it, League of Women Voters. We appreciate the work that you do. You got out great voter guides to help inform voters where they can think and see where we stand on the issues. And I also want to thank the Delta Sigma Theta sorority for their work behind the scenes, helping to make this happen. And I know they were instrumental in helping to make this go today. So again, thank you. I do want to say I'm Delegate Neil Parrott. I've been a delegate since my 3rd term. I grew up in Maryland. I've been in Maryland my whole life, very, very invested in Maryland. I went to the University of Maryland, College Park, where I got my civil engineering degree. I went on to the Mount St. Mary's University right there in Emmitsburg, where I got my MBA. I'm a professional engineer, so I worked with the State Highway Administration for about 12 and a half years. Then I went to the city of Frederick and was the Deputy Director of Public Works there, which is actually just the city engineer at the city of Frederick. Then I left to start my own company, Traffic Solutions Incorporated, which is what I do as well as serving as a delegate. One of the things I really care about going to DC is to straighten out the mess that's going on. We saw a really debacle with trying to impeach President Trump. I think that was a real mistake, and especially as we get more and more information that's coming forward that we're seeing, really that was a setup, and it's unfortunate. But I think we need to have people who are going to work to help America be great again. And that's one reason I want to go to DC, to help make America be the best that we can bring manufacturing back here. You know, we look at Western Maryland, manufacturing has just been slaughtered over the years, but we need to bring it back here. We don't need to be held hostage by China. And even just now, their pharmaceutical threat during the COVID-19, they said, if you treat us harshly, we're not going to trade with you fairly and give you the pharmaceuticals that you need. We need to be able to produce those here. There's so many more things, but I want to bring common sense to DC. I want to bring unity and help make America great again. Thank you.
All right, Congressman Trone, if you would introduce yourself. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank the League of Women Voters, again, Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and of course, Antietam Broadband for hosting. You know, even though we couldn't be here in person, this is fantastic. I wanted to say before we begin that the most important thing that we can do here is support one another and unite behind the workers, the families, and the small businesses that are facing the scariest time of their lives due to COVID. So no matter your party, we've got to come together as Team America, you know, during this time. For those who don't know me, my name is David Trone. I'm the congressman for Maryland's 6th District. The reason I ran for Congress, I call the 3 C's. They stand for compassion, stands for civility, and it stands for competence. By compassion, we mean caring for others, which we know is especially essential now with a global pandemic. By civility, it's working with everyone, Democrats, Republicans, to enact real changes and help people in their lives. In competence, we need folks that actually get something done in Washington, which is absolutely a challenge. I'm proud to say I've been focused on those values. I've kept my promise to be the first congressman ever to open 4 offices in the district. The days of Western Maryland being left behind are over. I've kept my promise to prioritize ending the opioid epidemic that's ravaged our state by starting the bipartisan freshman working group, 64 congressmen and women working on 25 bills, all bipartisan, to push mental health and addiction priorities. And I've kept my promise to be a voice for the voiceless, those that don't have a PAC, they don't have a lobbyist. I don't take money from PACs, I don't take money from lobbyists, and we never will. I come from the business world, and the business you plan long-term. Tonight, I look forward to talking about long-term plans we need to focus on to create a better, healthier future for our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Mr. Mayur, if we could hear about you, please.
Mr. Meyer was joined to us by telephone so that he would have audio, and that phone line is now open. I believe you should go on to the next segment.
Okay, very good. Jen, we will hear from Mr. Mayur when we're able to get audio. But right now we're going to move on to the questions. The first question will be for Congressman Trone. And for each of these questions, the candidates will have 60 seconds to respond. The first question, what are the most pressing reforms to our immigration system that you would like to see implemented, and why?
Well, America is really built on diversity, and that's what has made us strong. And we've got to have our immigration system, and yes, it protects our borders, absolutely, but we've got to think about our dreamers. You know, we've got to think about the other folks that are here that were born here, and they need to be able to stay here. So we need an immigration policy that's open, that's inclusive, that's diverse, and then celebrates all those parts of it. So a comprehensive immigration plan is where we need to go. Building a wall is just a really, really bad idea. Yes, safe borders, I've got it. But at the same time, you know, we need to celebrate, you know, who we are as a country. You know, the mixture of America is what has made America the country we are, with great ideas, great new businesses, and that's what we should be celebrating and encouraging. More diversity.
Thank you. Do we have Mr. Mayur available yet?
Yes, you do.
Oh, very good. Yeah, Mr. Mayur, you have 2 minutes to introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Let me go straight to the point. I am an immigrant from India. I came to this country about 30 years back. So during the time, I got into the country via Pan Am, and the pilot was nice enough to circle around the city of New York. I was able to see World Trade Center from New York. And today we do not have the Pan Am. We do not have the World Trade Center. Now we are stayed out having a major havoc caused by COVID. So as a country, we were unprepared for each one of the events, including COVID. And each time the country is divided by the unnecessary impeachment. First is Clinton's impeachment, followed by 9/11. Second is Mr. Trump's impeachment, followed by the COVID virus. The impeachments distract our executive branch to focus on governing the nation. And the Congress wasted 3 years, just wasted time on Russia, Ukraine, and impeachment. Now we found that impeachment was totally meaningless. There were some deep state actors did something against various members of incoming Trump administration, resulting in this huge chaos that took the focus of our nation from safeguarding itself. Coronavirus right now, by November, may be taking away 200,000 American lives, which is utterly meaningless, and it caused enormous hardship for everyone, and we lost trillions of dollars of wealth, and 35 million Americans are unemployed. At this point in time, United States cannot immigrate any more people, and we should issue a moratorium on immigration, and we should allow our neighbors from Central and South America come to our country and work in a Pan-American passport and visa. We cannot give citizenship to everyone who wants to come in this country and earn some money and go back. There is no need for that. We should allow Central and South American people to come to this country and work and go back if they want to. And if somebody wants to become a U.S. citizen, we should increase the threshold of who becomes a U.S. citizen. We cannot give the lottery system and give away our citizenship or somebody investing money. We should make citizenship as a serious thing. And we should act together and bring about solution to make America great again.
Thank you very much. Let me direct to you the same question that I did to the congressman. What are the most pressing reforms to our immigration system that you would like to see implemented, and why?
As I earlier said, I would like to prevent illegal immigration altogether. America is the richest nation in the Western Hemisphere. We have a lot of disadvantaged population down south, and we should allow them to come into our country legally and work and earn money. A similar way, people from India, Philippines, and Bangladesh and Pakistan go to Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE. They go there, earn money, then return back in India and the respective countries. United States allow the same model for those people, everybody to come here, including Cuba, come here, work here, earn money, maybe tax-free, take the money, take home, retire there. We should not confuse the citizenship with somebody who wants to work and earn money for their family. Right now, the tragedy is people are coming here, rushing to the border, and harming themselves and harming the American economy. That should end. And we should increase the threshold for somebody becoming a citizen. You know, they have to serve in the military, they have to have an education, they have to be self-sustaining to become a U.S. citizen. We cannot bring in more and more people into our welfare system with the 35 million Americans already unemployed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Let me pose this same question to Mr. Barrow. What are the most pressing reforms to our immigration system that you would like to see implemented, and why?
Sure thing. Thanks for the question. The first thing that when I think immigration, I immediately think of my students in Montgomery Village, Watkinsville High School. And I think that we need to end, number one, immigrant demonization. I think about Trump's wall. I I think about the fear in their lives coming from ICE. I think about these children in the camps at the border. We need to end the demonization of immigrants in this country. And I would even support providing mental health services to those who have suffered at the hands of the Trump administration. The second thing I would love to see for immigration is to simplify and streamline the path to citizenship. Like Congressman Trone said, immigrants are great and they're the strength of our country. And we need to encourage people to come here, and then become citizens once they are here. They can participate in our democracy, participate in our country, and give back to all the Americans who are already here. We want to welcome as many Americans as possible, make this country as great as it can be. So those are my two things I would focus on with immigration.
Thank you. Mr. Parrott, I'm going to direct a different question now to you. We have a different set of questions. Current polling suggests that the majority of Americans favor the availability of a government-supported health program. What is your position, and what specific measures are you prepared to work for if you win this race?
Let me just first by saying Obamacare has been a complete disaster. When we look at it, it was called the Affordable Care Act, and data shows us that health insurance rates have more than doubled since Obamacare was passed. I mean, that's simply not affordable to Americans. We need to change the system so that it's more private market driven, so that we can increase competition and we can decrease costs. That's the way the private market works, and it works very, very well. We need to make sure that happens in the healthcare market. You know, when you go to the hospital or you go to the doctors, you have no idea how much it costs. My son just the other day almost got a cast, and he was like, well, maybe we can make a cast on our own. And I always thought to myself, well, there's no reason to make the cast on your own because it's free through your healthcare, but it's not free. It does have a cost, and we should be looking at costs as Americans and try and bring down those costs, bring it back to the free market, let people make decisions. And again, this Obamacare, doubling the cost, that's unacceptable.
Good. Thank you, sir. My next question will be directed toward Mr. Meyer. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Mr. Parrott. Current polling suggests that the majority of Americans favor the availability of a government-supported health program. What is your position, and what specific measures are you prepared to work for if you win this race?
I would see that there is some kind of safety net available. Right now, 35 million Americans lost their job. They no longer would have their employee-sponsored health care, and they need to rely upon the emergency room. There should be a cost-effective way. Somebody can go and pay like $50 and see a doctor and out of their pocket. So government should provide some level of safety net to provide the minimal life-saving measures to anyone, whether they have insurance or not. Current situation is unacceptable. Actually, we had our son when we were students, PhD students at Old Dominion. My son stayed in the hospital for 4 more days, and he was treated by our great governor of Virginia, Dr. Nodham. Dr. Nodham treated my son. I stuck with the $40,000 medical bill as a student. I have to abandon my PhD and walk out with master's. So healthcare cost is too high, and it's devastating for the families. And America cannot continue on this. It is right now it is like a dice game. It shouldn't be. People should have some safety net.
Thank you very much. I noticed the time is up. Let me direct this next question. Well, it's the same question. It'll be to the Congressman Trone. Current polling suggests the majority of Americans favor the availability of a government-supported health program. What is your position, and what specific measures are you prepared to work for if you win this race?
Well, we got to start with healthcare is a human right, period. So that's where we start. That's the value we start with. It's a human right. The ACA, the Affordable Care Act, has helped millions of people toward universal coverage where we must land. Matter of fact, the ACA now, it's more popular than ever. Every year it gets better and more popular. Unfortunately, Republicans and President Trump are trying to repeal this law, and they're fighting it every day in court. We cannot let that happen. Defending the Affordable Care Act and preventing the administration from sabotaging that law is paramount. We also need a public option, allowing millions of Americans to buy into Medicare. We need to expand Medicaid by state, crack down on price gouging by big pharma, and we got to negotiate lower drug prices. We pass lower drug costs now. That act will benefit, if it goes to the Senate, 600,000 folks in Maryland.
Thank you, Congressman. Mr. Barreau, the next question will be directed toward you. Which layer of government, the federal or state, should assume primary leadership in addressing the current pandemic? What would be the appropriate roles of each layer of government? Lastly, how should the response be funded?
Thank you for the question. So when I hear that, the first thing I think is this AP Gov term that I always use with my students, which is marble cake federalism, which we can't treat the two layers of national and state as fully separate. They need to intertwine. We need to have federal guidelines, federal leadership, and state implementation, state administration. So federal government should be going through and setting what the states shouldn't be doing in terms of testing, PPE, reopening, and all that. And then states should go through and actually implement it because they are better at helping their citizens than the federal government. Federal government's too big. States are designed to be way more helpful for individual people. So federal guidelines, state administration. In terms of the debt, the national government, as we saw back in 1780s with the Articles of Confederation, the Whiskey Rebellion, the Shays Rebellion, sorry, confusing my two rebellions with Washington. With Shays Rebellion, is that the federal government can absorb that debt. If we let the states acquire debt, we're going to have farmers marching on the Massachusetts courthouse. We need the federal government to absorb the debt from those states so the states can afford to help their citizens as best as possible.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Parrott, I'm going to direct the same question toward you. Which layer of government, the federal or state, should assume primary leadership in addressing the current pandemic? What should be the appropriate roles of each layer? Lastly, how should the response be funded?
I think it's an important and timely question right now. You know, when we look at this pandemic, let's compare it to the Spanish influenza pandemic in 1918. 50 million people worldwide died. And so far with this pandemic, we're talking 318,000, and it's nowhere close. This is not the pandemic that we're talking about. It's not even a comparison, Spanish influenza and this one. What we're seeing are governors that are out of control, taking too much power that's not really allowed to give them. They're violating people's First Amendment freedom of religion. They're doing other things. Now, we do need to take this seriously. I think suggestions from the governor and suggestions from the president both need to occur, and people do need to be careful and cautious. But we need to put this in perspective, and we can't forfeit our freedoms for a little bit of safety. It just doesn't work well that way. That's a great quote from one of our forefathers. We need to make sure that we maintain our freedoms even through this epidemic. As far as paying for it, we're talking 25% of the U.S. debt right now. Over $6 trillion is costing us so far. It's just out of control. We can't pay that. We've got to get people back to work.
Thank you very much. We are going to move on to another question, and I'm going to this is sort of the midpoint, so I'm going to ask folks to please pay attention to the time, and if we cannot run over our allotted time. Thank you. This question will be directed toward Mr. Mayor. What are the pros and cons of voting by mail in the upcoming election in November? And what should be the federal role? How do we keep voting safe and secure?
I believe the November election should be conducted normally, no mail-in ballots, unless people are serving in the military or they cannot come to the poll. Voter fraud would cause huge hardship and integrity of our country. Al Gore's lost the hanging chair won with 535 votes, harmed our country for a decade. We should not have November election conducted by mail predominantly. It should be in-person voting mostly. And voter fraud should be covered at all costs. And we cannot have a situation where in February we are finding that somebody defrauded, that's why we have a different president. No, we cannot have that. That's my answer. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Let me direct the same question to Congressman Trone. What are the pros and cons of voting by mail in the upcoming election in November? What should be the federal role, and how do we keep voting safe and secure?
Well, without question, throughout America, voting rights are under attack. And the mission has to be the more people that can vote, the better government we're going to get. So we need to encourage to every single thing we possibly can do to get more folks to vote. Don't you think everybody has a right to stand up and be part of our democracy? Everybody. That's what we're here for. And we've seen this attack, and that's why we need voting by mail, or what I call mostly mail. And that means everybody in Maryland needs to be sent a ballot with a prepaid postage envelope so every eligible voter can send it back prepaid. And we need physical spaces where folks can go that can't get, don't do the ballot, that are historically disenfranchised. They can go there also. We need uniform 15 days voting for early voting, mostly mail, automatic voter registration, and safe and secure places so more people can be out and more people can vote. There's no fraud in mail voting. That is just a flat out lie.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Barrow, we're going to move on to a new topic now. Do you believe there's a growing income gap? How would you address it? Explain your answer, please.
Sure thing. Thank you. In terms of do I believe there's an income gap, it's not a matter of belief. It's fact. You look at the Gini index of, I'm sure Congressman Trump, businessman, gets that, right? You look at the Gini index, we're near 0.5, which is the highest it's been in the past 50 to 60 years. Before the 1980s, it was down below 0.4. So our income gap is widening. It's not a question of belief. It's just a question of facts and science. So how would we address that? Number one, we need to go back to the income brackets, the income tax brackets that we had before Ronald Reagan's trickle down. We look at the 50s, 60s, and 70s, some of the biggest expansion of our economy we've ever seen, and the top levels of our income brackets were 50, 60, 70% or higher in some cases. So we need to go back to higher income tax brackets on our wealthiest citizens so that they can kick back and help everyone else improve. I would also fight for a true universal basic income. What Congress is doing during the pandemic is great, but we need to take it a step further and make sure that all people in America have a universal income.
Good. Thank you, sir. Let me direct this question now to Mr. Parrott. Do you believe there's a growing income gap? How would you address it? And please explain your answer.
Great, thank you. It's an opportunity to answer this question. Is there an income gap? Really, the United States, I believe, is one of the greatest countries in the world. You can grow up poor and become a multimillionaire. Why is that possible? It's because of capitalism. It's because people can invest, they can work really hard, they can take risks, and they can succeed, like the congressman did. I appreciate what he's done with his business. But that's the kind of thing we want to allow. We want to allow people to be successful. In our country, we don't guarantee the equality of outcome. It's the equality of opportunity. Now, here's the big problem. There isn't an equality of opportunity for many kids. So many kids are stuck in poor schools, stuck in schools that are not performing at all. They're way below. They keep failing year after year, and yet their kids are stuck in those schools. We need to have freedom of school choice, where parents can take control of their kids' education, where they can have vouchers, where they can go to schools that are really going to help their kids succeed and help them to go to that new plateau. That is what we need. We need to help people to have that freedom of opportunity.
Thank you, sir. And lastly, I will direct this question toward Mr. Mayor. Do you believe there is a growing income gap? How would you address it? Explain your answer.
Sure. Thank you for this question. This is one of the most important things. If you look at it, latest merger in the healthcare industry where a pharmacy chain bought a big insurance company, the big insurance company chairman walked away with $500 million. Now the pharmacy people work minimum wage, going to repay that $500 million to Wall Street. This is the most ridiculous thing. Nobody needs $500 million. We should cap the executive compensation. That is a must. This is a great shame on this country. These minimum wage workers are the ones going to repay this. And I will definitely cap executive wages to $1 million and make sure the bonus, everybody gets bonus at the same level, from the minimum wage earner to the CEO. We are to rationalize the compensation pattern in this country. That's a must.
Good. Thank you very much. This ends the portion of the program with the questions which the organizers have come up with. And I would encourage people, if they haven't already, I would encourage those who are watching to submit questions. This is a perfect opportunity for you to hear from each of these candidates. And what I'm going to do is, while I'm waiting for questions to come to me, I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to direct this to Congressman Trone. What are Maryland's environmental concerns that warrant a federal role? And generally, how do you choose between economic development and protecting the environment when the two seem to be in tension?
Well, in Maryland, it all starts with the Chesapeake Bay. So we've got to absolutely keep the bay where it is, better and better and better, and make that our real focus. And, you know, we've supported that. I've got a 100% rating from the Sierra Club, the League of Conservation Voters. The bay has to be first and foremost. But at the end of the day, government's got to think long-term. In long-term, that starts with our kids and what they inherit. And what they have to inherit is a world that has clean air, clean water, you know, good earth, no pollutions. That's got to be our focus. So some of the ideas and the concepts that are in the New Green Deal are really important, because that's the biggest, most important long-term thinking we're ever going to do, is thinking about the earth that our children and their children inherit. So we got to get that right. There's no this is an absolute.
Good. Thank you very much, sir. Let me direct the next question to this same question to Mr. Parrott. What are Maryland's environmental concerns that warrant a federal role? And generally, how do you choose between economic development and protecting the environment when the two seem to be in tension?
Thank you for the question. I think it's very, very important. I serve on the Environmental and Transportation Committee in the Maryland House of Delegates. And on that committee, obviously, we talk about the environment a lot. I think a lot of these decisions really need to be left to the state of Maryland. When we look at the Chesapeake Bay, it is very, very important to our state. And yet right now, it's the cleanest that it's ever been in our history since like the 50s. I grew up on the Chesapeake Bay. Actually, we had a sailboat on Plum Creek, which is right off of the Severn River. And so I'm heavily invested. I swam in the creek and in the Severn River all the time. We need to make sure that we keep the bay clean. But we don't want to go overboard and have requirements that are so onerous that we can't have manufacturing back in our state. We've got to bring manufacturing back. In Western Maryland, we should be allowing development to occur and a manufacturing to occur without saying, no, you can't do anything at all with some of the natural resources that you have in Western Maryland. It's very, very important that we get our country moving. China is the world's most polluter by far. We want to bring manufacturing here, not keep it over in China where they're polluting like crazy.
Good. Thank you, sir. And Mr. Barreau, I will ask you the same question. What are Maryland's environmental concerns that warrant a federal role? And generally, how do you choose between economic development and protecting the environment when the two seem to be in tension?
Great question. Personally, I would always say that, again, it's a hard choice to make. You got to protect people's jobs. You got to protect people's income. You got to protect people's livelihood. But we also need to make sure the planet is secure, the planet is clean, the planet is going to be here for a long time, our climate's going to be here for a long time. So again, I hate to make the choice, but if I have to, I'm going to say environment. We need to protect our environment. We need to make sure that the air is clean, the water is clean, and that everything is here for a very long time. Now, in terms of Maryland, I echo what the two gentlemen said in terms of the Chesapeake Bay. It's very, very important. But also we have to think about Montgomery County, Frederick County, very, very dense areas, especially 6 districts, Frederick County, very, very dense areas. We need to put more focus into public transportation. The federal government could fund public transportation projects in dense areas, both here in the 6th district and throughout the country. So that would really help get people off the roads, out of their cars, and help the environment. We could also work with getting public transportation and rail lines up to Western Maryland, up to Hagerstown, up to Garrett County, up to Allegheny County, so that those people are more connected to what's going on in Washington, D.C. and more populated, dense areas.
Good. Thank you very much. We have a question here from an interested audience member. And this will be directed first to Mr. Mayer. How do we ensure during this pandemic that students can have the resources necessary for distance learning?
The high-speed internet should be made available to everyone. Am I audible?
I'm sorry?
Am I audible? It shows
Yes.
the mute.
Yes, you are.
Okay, sure. High-speed internet should be made available to everyone, and it should be available at a subsidized cost for people who cannot afford. And all the students should have the same level of internet access. Broadband access is most important thing. This may not be the last pandemic, as we are globally connected, and many countries people eat various things as delicacies. We will have different versions of pandemic entering into our country. So we should have the distance learning capability for all the students, irrespective of their economic situation.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Let me direct the same question to Mr. Parrott. How do we ensure that all students have the necessary resources for learning during this pandemic through distance learning?
I think it's a great question. A lot of students right now are learning from home. They've decided, Governor Hogan decided, we're not going to go back to school this year. It's going to be in September. There's nothing that's going to happen over the next 3 weeks that's going to change the situation. What we need to do is open the schools, get the kids back in the classroom so they have the best chance to succeed. We can't cheat these kids out of months of education by keeping them at home. Now, I'm all for homeschooling. I think it's fantastic. I'm all for private schools. But the public schools, what they're doing right now, they need to go back and learn in the regular environment that they're used to. We can do that. Certainly, I believe in September we should be back in school. So I think this question is moot until maybe this hits again. But kids need to go back to school and they need to learn as best they can while they're there. Again, for those who are trapped in failing schools, we've got to provide that opportunity so they can go to private schools or another school, other ways where they can learn to get out of that failing school and have that opportunity to succeed.
Good. Thank you, sir. Congressman Trone, if I may direct that same question toward you. How do we ensure that students have the necessary resources with distance learning during this pandemic?
At the end of the day, our most important responsibility is to our children and their children, and education. Education is central to that. And right now, health has got to come first during this pandemic, but it's also exposed the failure in the system with broadband. So I've talked to my 9 college presidents, my 5 county superintendents on an ongoing basis, our teachers, the union members, all the folks in the system. And what we see is absolutely abject failure for the folks at the low end of the income brackets. 42% of our low income learners, rural and the urban deserts, are not getting efficient broadband. We've got to fix broadband. It's an $86 billion job. We've got to get the next infrastructure bill. There's a great bill for it. We got $5 billion in CARES too for schools and libraries, but broadband has to happen. It's a right. It's like healthcare, electrification. We did that. We did roads. Now we need the digital highway. We owe it, and we're going to make it happen across America.
Good. Thank you, sir. Another member of the audience has asked this question, which is certainly very, very pertinent. And I'm going to direct this, first of all, to Mr. Barrow. How can the federal government assist in ensuring that our supply chains are still functioning properly during this pandemic?
So the first thing that we need to do is make sure that everyone involved with the supply chain during the pandemic is getting adequate testing, adequate quarantining, adequate PPE, and everything they need to make sure that they are safe during this pandemic. That's the number one thing, right? If the people who are actually at the factories, at the ports, at the whatever part of the supply chain you're thinking about in that moment, if the people there are getting sick and it's spreading, the supply chain crumbles. So we need to make sure those people are safe and secure. The next thing is looking at all the origin points throughout the supply chain to make sure all of those points are taking the necessary precautions, especially foreign places. We need to work with those foreign governments to make sure they're taking the necessary precautions to protect their people from coronavirus. That's really what it comes down to, just every single step of the way, making sure that we're keeping everyone safe. For the last 10 seconds, though, I want to, as a career teacher, to talk about the distance learning. I definitely agree. Number one, we got to improve the internet access. Number two, to go off what Delegate Parrott said, these next 3 weeks are a wash. We need to put all of our efforts into making sure that in September, teachers are ready to go with true distance learning. I'm not saying go back to school in September, but that the teachers are ready to go in September.
Good. Thank you very much. Mr. Meyer, how can the federal government assist in ensuring that our supply chains are still functioning properly during this pandemic?
The first thing we need to do is make sure that all our logistics staff, like truckers and loaders and our shipping industry workers, they are protected. So government should ensure that they are tested frequently and protected. In case if they get coronavirus, they should be properly compensated and treated. If they are going on a short-term disability, long-term disability, federal government should protect their family with the proper earnings. So that is a must. They are the ones who are sacrificing the most in this whole scenario. Similarly, our grocery store workers who are minimum wage earners, they are the heroes now. They are feeding everyone. So we should make sure every one of the frontline workers who are involving transporting and delivering the items to our doorsteps are safeguarded health-wise and financially. That is federal responsibility.
Thank you very much. And Delegate Parrott, let me direct this question to you as well. How can the federal government assist in ensuring that our supply chains are still functioning properly during this pandemic?
Well, great question. I think the first thing we need to realize is that we are a capitalist society and that the supply chain could just stay open as long as the businesses are allowed to stay open. I think that we have essential businesses and non-essential businesses. There's no such thing. Every business is essential. I talk to so many small business owners. They're almost bankrupt right now because they have not been allowed to open. It's just wrong. They need to be open, be allowed to be open. Of course, they need to take the precautions to make sure they're wearing masks, the 6 feet distance, no more than 10 people. All of those things are great guidelines to have. But businesses have got to open up. If we don't open up businesses, we've already increased the national debt. $2 trillion was spent by Congress, just giving money to people. $4 trillion has been lost in tax income because we're not producing what we need to produce. We've got, and that's 25% of the national debt. And, I keep hearing Nancy Pelosi saying, well, let's spend another $3 trillion here, another $4 trillion there. We can't do that. I remember HROS Pro. We've got to balance the budget or we're going to go bankrupt this country. We can't do that. We're spending too much on the interest. It's time to stop the borrowing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. This is a question from someone who's part of the LGBTQ community. As this person's representative in Congress, what would you do to protect this person's civil rights? Do you support the Full Equality Act or similar legislation? I'm going to direct this question to Congressman Trone.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it starts off with the Equality Act. And, Congress passed the Equality Act. That's the key to ensuring LGBTQ individuals are protected from discrimination, work, school, and nationwide. Unfortunately, the Trump administration has systematically attacked transgender individuals, barring them from serving the military. So we need to get a Democrat in the White House to reverse this misguided policy. But transgender people are 50% more likely to be unemployed. Tragically, 50% of the youth suicides are with transgender folks before their 20th birthday. These are folks we should be working with and helping instead of calling out and ostracizing. So this discrimination all is just continually ongoing, and it's great the Supreme Court stepped up and legalized same-sex marriage. That was a big victory for the country, but we have to eliminate the discrimination on sexual orientation. It's just wrong.
Thank you, sir. Let me direct the same question to Mr. Barrow. We heard the first part. As a representative to Congress, what would you do to protect the civil rights of those LGBTQ folks in our district? Do you support the Full Equality Act or similar legislation?
Thank you for the question. So yes, number one, I do support the Full Equality Act, and I would even attempt to try and restart the motions for the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment. There's no reason why that should not be accomplished in this day and age, right? It was ready to go in the 80s and then ended up dying. So we should go back to passing the ERA. I also think one of the best things we can do for the LGBTQ community is to make sure we have leaders. This goes all the way to the presidency, but leaders in executive branch and Congress at all levels that have respect for all people. You look at who's in the White House, you look at what you see, and what you see is just constant demonization of certain groups, especially the LGBTQ group from the White House. So we need to make sure we have leaders who trust all Americans, regardless of their background, regardless of their life, whoever they are, and support them in every situation. There's no reason that Congressman Trone said those stats are sickening. There's no reason why that should be allowed to continue in our country.
Good. Thank you, sir. And let me address this to Mr. Mayer. Same question. As a representative in Congress, what would you do to protect the civil rights of those in the LGBTQ community? Do you support the Full Equality Act or similar legislation?
I do not know much about the Full Equality Act. I would legislate in such a way that nobody is discriminated, and including LGBT community. And I believe that Trump administration doing its best to support LGBT community, and it is giving a lot of big positions and top positions to people of all diversity groups. There are certain things which we need to consider. If somebody wants to serve in the military, they should not make the taxpayer to pay for their reassignment surgery. Other than that, I support LGBT to serve in our military.
Good. Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, thank you very much. This ends the question part of the forum. I'll give you a little time to collect your thoughts for a 2-minute closing. But first, I want to thank those in the audience who are watching and paying attention, and especially those who have submitted questions. I know I didn't get to all the questions. I would like to, but we are limited in time. I would encourage you to join future forum when they're held, or direct your questions to the candidates.
Dr. Powell, we have some remarks from Jan Goodman prior to
Yes.
our closing remarks.
Yes, thank you.
Jan, proceed.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jan Goodman, the president of Frederick County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. As co-sponsor for tonight's forum, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Frederick and Washington counties and the Frederick County Alumni Chapter, I would like to thank our candidates for making the extra effort to participate tonight, especially given these extraordinary times. We also extend a special thanks to our moderator, Dr. Michael Powell, Ms. Rochelle Kithcart, and Ms. Kimberly Scott for fielding audience questions, and to the Antietam Broadband for their invaluable assistance and cooperation. May you all have a good night, stay safe, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now we're at that portion of the forum where the candidates will make conclusionary remarks. And we will start off with Mr. Mayer. You will have 2 minutes, sir.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this forum, and thank you, my fellow candidates, for joining in this forum. And our nation in a crossroads. There are 30 million Americans are unemployed, and our nation is under $30 billion debt. In this situation, we need to come together, and we should be optimistic as well as conservative. We cannot continue on immigrating million people each year. We should reduce it to 100,000 each year. We should allow our South and Central American neighbors to come and work in this country legally with the work permits and go back to their country whenever they want to. And we should rotate them to come here and serve here for 3 years or 5 years and go back to their country. We cannot allow this illegal immigration and illegal employment to continue anymore. We should subsidize the education. Families should not go for abortion thinking that they cannot afford their children's education. That is the worst thing that is happening in this country. I know many people aborted their children because they cannot afford college. That is very bad. I would make sure that college costs come down. I would wipe out $500 billion out of student debt, entire interest on the student debt. People need to allow to pay only the principal. And I would allow interest-free student loans for next decade. And I will reduce the educational costs down, reducing a lot of mandates the higher education has. It is a shame in this country, people cannot go for higher education, which they are qualified for. Our nation's future relies upon our youngsters, and that is only through higher education and good high school education. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, sir. Congressman Trone, you're next.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for having us here today. We really appreciate it. I'm really proud of my team, and they've been able to accomplish in Congress and I look forward to continuing to work hard, really hard for people of Maryland's 6th District. In business, you take care of the customer. In government, you take care of the constituent. In my office, taking care of the constituents during COVID looks like staying late every night until every phone call, every email is returned. People get what they need. Over 23,000 calls and emails have come in since COVID. How to help with unemployment, how to help with a paycheck protection plan, how to help folks with PPE, how to help the people. And taking care of constituents means traveling to Western Maryland to listen and learn from where people are at. But now, of course, taking care of the constituent means telephones, Zoom calls, teletown halls, weekly with our hospitals, our school superintendents, our elected officials, our college presidents, our business leaders, and our frontline workers to figure out how we work together and how we can advocate on their issues, their challenges in Congress. So I look forward to continuing to prioritize fighting in the opioid epidemic, continue to drive funding to address the mental health crisis we have in America, and continue pushing for broadband access everywhere so folks can rely on telemedicine, teleeducation, and telework, because many are being left behind. And we need to continue to think long-term about our future of our children by funding medical research, thinking long-term. It's been my honor to serve as your congressman. I look forward to continuing to make progress, keep the promises to help create a better and more equitable future for all Marylanders. Thank you again.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Barrow, your conclusionary remarks, please.
Sure, thank you. Every year I teach the Constitution. In the preamble, one of the core missions of this country is to promote the general welfare. This pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic, has proven that the current state of affairs cannot promote the general welfare. It just can't. We have 14.7% unemployment. Nearly 40 million Americans are unemployed as a result of this pandemic. People are losing their health insurance. People are losing their livelihoods. We need to take real progressive change to really make a difference to all the people in this country. Never again should people lose their job and lose their health care. Every American should have access to health care, no matter their employment status. We need a true universal healthcare system. Never again should people have to worry about their unemployment benefits kicking in. We should have a true universal basic income in this country. And as we rebuild, as we reopen, we have a golden opportunity to take those nearly 40 million unemployed people and redirect their efforts, similar to FDR, redirect their efforts towards improving our planet and our climate with a true Green New Deal. We have a real opportunity here to do lots of real great progressive things in this country that can benefit everybody, all Americans, from people living in the dense urban Montgomery County to the people living in rural Garrett County and Western Maryland. We can do a lot for the people of the 6th District. We can do a lot for everybody, and no one has to be left behind to do that. This is our opportunity. This is our time, and to accept anything else is unacceptable, in my opinion. But thank you so much to the League of Women Voters, Delta Sigma Theta, and everyone else for putting this together. Really appreciate it.
Good. Thank you, sir. Delegate Parrott, it looks like you, sir, have the final word.
Well, I want to first of all thank the League of Women Voters for putting this on, and Delta Sigma Theta sorority and Frederick for putting this on. Also, Dr. Powell, you did a great job moderating. Thank you. I just want to talk a little bit about today. Today I started, my wife was out sign waving here in Hagerstown where we live. I was out in Little Orleans and out in Hancock putting out signs, where I've been trying to put out signs all across this district. I'm working hard for this election. I promise that I will work hard for you if you elect me to U.S. Congress. There's a lot of work to be done. You know, it's a couple interesting things that happened in this debate I want to talk, if I can, really briefly. One has to do with broadband and healthcare. I heard that said that that's a human right. What's a human right? Well, who's paying for that human right? That's not a human right. A human right is our God-given rights as declared in the Declaration of Independence. It's not some man-made thing where we said, well, it's a human right to get food. It doesn't happen that way. Someone is paying that bill, and it can't be a human right if someone else is paying for that bill. What if the money goes away? Also, I want to talk about what needs to happen with immigration. I didn't have that question, so just real briefly, we need to secure the border with Mexico. So several reasons. One, human trafficking. People are prostituted, come across that border. It's horrible. That needs to stop. On that border, we have illegal drugs that are coming across. Over 99% of the drugs that come into our country are coming from the border of Mexico. That's got to be stopped. If we are serious at all about the opioids and the fentanyl problem in our country, we need to cut it off, and we need to build the wall between Mexico and the United States so we can work to cut it off. Another thing on the border, of course, is illegal aliens coming across. And just look at Montgomery County. The number of rapes have skyrocketed. MS-13 and the gangs are hurting people. We've got to cut that off. The way to cut it off is build the wall, be serious about our immigration policies. Look, I want to bring common sense solutions to DC. I want to help you and serve you, and I want to humbly ask for your vote right now for the primaries and then hopefully in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. This concludes the forum. We have closing remarks by President Carrie Burson.
So in closing, we want you to remember that for election and candidate information, you have the LWV online and printed versions of our 2020 voters guides and the vote411.org website as resources. Launched by the League of Women Voters in 2006, vote411.org is a one-stop shop for election-related information. It provides information to the public with both general and state-specific details about topics that include absentee or mail-in ballot information, early voting options, election dates, factual data on candidates in various federal, state, and local races, such as job descriptions and salaries, general information such as how to watch debates and forums with a critical eye, ID requirements in states that require identification, polling place locations, registration deadlines, voter qualifications, voter registration forms, voting machine specifics, and anything else election related. Vote411.org also provides candidate responses in their own words to important questions like the ones that were covered tonight. On behalf of all of us, thank you for your attention. Please stay safe and healthy, and remember to vote.